In this tutorial, I'm going to discuss how I created this channel setting using 3mm cabochons. So right now I'm just getting all my wire together. I've already pre-cut it for this video, and the wire that I'm going to be using is 21 gauge square as well as 22 gauge half round. The stones I'll be using for this project are 3mm opal cabochons. A cabochon is a stone that has a flat bottom, and the reason that I'm using 3mm cabochons as well as 5 pieces of 21 gauge square wire is because you'll notice when I put the 3mm stone on 5 pieces of 21 gauge, it sets perfectly with just a little bit of snug room on one side, which when the stone sets in the center, it will give just a little bit of room on both sides of the stone. You don't necessarily want the stones to be at 100% flush with the amount of square wire that you're using, because you'll see later on in this video that once you attach the stones on top, you'll have a little bit of the 22 gauge half round wire that sticks out. And I don't want any of the wire to stick out. I kind of want it more flush with the piece for the wearer. The tools I'm also using in this project is a precision screwdriver, which essentially is a small flathead screwdriver, along with needle nose pliers. The pair I'm using is just a small pair. So right now I have my 5 pieces of 21 gauge square wire, and I'm taking my 22 gauge half round wire and wrapping a few times around just to get the 5 pieces of square wire connected and snug. Next, I'll be taking these 4 pieces of 22 gauge half round wire. I'm showing you guys right now, one side is flat and the other side has a kind of half round edge to it, hence the term half round wire. What I'm going to be doing with this wire is I'm going to put the flat side of it down so that the flat side essentially will encase the round portion of the stone when I set it into place. So I'm going to attach these 4 pieces of 22 gauge half round wire now to the 5 pieces of 21 gauge square wire. And I'm going to attach it with just a couple loops around. I just want to get the 22 gauge half round snug in place. That way I can bend it up, wrap underneath it, and then tie it back down. So now that I have those 4 pieces tied down, I'm going to take the 4 pieces and bend it up at the last point that I secure these wires in place. Now I'm going to wrap the 5 pieces of 21 gauge square wire underneath 6 times. And the reason that I'm doing 6 times is because that's the length of the 3mm stone when I put it on top of the square wire. Okay, so now that I have 6 pieces wrapped around the square wire. I'm going to put my half round wire back flush with my square, wrap it a few times just to keep my half round in place. What I'm going to do next is not start another 6 wraps, but I'm just going to tie this 22 gauge half round that I've been using around the square wire down so that it's snug and doesn't kind of unravel at any point. Okay, so now that that's in place, I'm going to take my precision screwdriver and I'm going to start wedging it underneath my 22 gauge half round wire that I just secured on top. The reason for is because this is where I'm going to set my 3mm cabochon. So now that we've created a wedge between the square wire and the half round wire that we set on top, this is where we're going to place the 3mm cabochon. Like I mentioned before, a cabochon has a flat bottom, so the flat bottom is going to go on top of the square wire with the half round wire going over top the round portion of the stone. So I'm just going to squeegee this stone in place, and now how I'm going to fully secure this stone is I'm going to separate the 4 pieces of half round wire that I set on top in half, so 2 on both sides. One way to do this is kind of just to push in the center of it and squeeze the half round to both sides. You'll notice that when I do that, it will separate the half round to the left and to the right side. Now I'm going to kind of pull the wire so that I can secure the stone in place. One way that I do this is by taking my pliers and pulling on my half round. That's going to tighten the wire onto the stone, leaving no gap. And you'll see later I do an example where I separate the wire on top and you'll see that gap. Okay, now that we set one, let's go ahead and set a few more. So as before, we're going to lift up the 4 pieces of half round wire that we have set on top. We're going to wrap the 5 pieces of 21 gauge square wire 6 times, as that's the measurement for the 3mm stone that I'll be placing on top. Then after that, I'll push back the 4 pieces of half round wire, secure them in place, and then I'll add another stone. So now that we've created another channel to set a stone, let's go ahead and take our precision screwdriver and pry open between the square wire and the half round wire, leaving a little opening to squeeze another 3mm stone through. The reason that I'm also going to be using my needle nose pliers to push through is, one, because the needle nose plier has a round portion of one side and that same needle nose is flat, so it's not going to scratch my wire, and it's also allowing me to stretch my wire open to allow for a stone to go through. You'll see in this example, this stone is giving me a hard time only because it's a little bit bigger than the first stone that I set in. It's the same 3 millimeters, it's just more rounded at the top. So I'm going to have to take the stone out and open it up just a little bit more because I don't want to damage the stone by squeezing it. It's much better to just have an open space and then put the stone in. Also, you can guess if you create a bigger hole than the stone, the wires on top are going to be loose. So that's another reason why I pull my wires at the end, is to tighten them onto the stone and not have any gaps in between. And just like I mentioned, because this was a little bit of a bigger hole, I now have loose wires that are setting on top. So the only way to correct that is to pull the wire and get it snug on the stone. It's a very simple fix because since you already have secured those half round wires on top, all you have to do is pull them and it will tighten onto the stone in place. After that, just push them up at a 90-degree angle and start on your next channel. So now that we tightened those half round wires on top, I'm just showing you now that we've eliminated that gap on the stone and it's now setting flush on it. Pulling back the wires, we're just going to create another channel. The same thing as before, we're going to set those top half round wires at a 90-degree angle. We're going to wrap our half round wire around our square wire. We're going to secure the top pieces of half round wire and then create a wedge between the two to set another 3 millimeter stone. So as before, we're going to take our precision tool and create a wedge between the two pieces of wire. So I'm just going to tighten the wires on top to secure it onto the stone. And there we have it. We've created a channel setting using 3 millimeter cabochons, 21 gauge square, as well as 22 gauge half round wire. What do you guys think? Next week, I'm going to discuss another channel setting that I do using 3 millimeter facets, which are cut stones that have a point at the bottom. Here I'm showing you some 3 millimeter facets that I have, along with the channel setting that I'll be doing in my next tutorial video. What do you guys think about this style of channel setting? Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video helped you. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comment section below.